Okay, so today we want to continue to talk about the double angle, power reducing, and half angle formulas. So all these formulas come from where? The sum and the difference formulas. Okay, so I will introduce you all these formulas, one by one. Okay, so sine 2 theta equal to sine theta cosine theta. Where does this thing come from? Sine 2 theta is actually what? Sine of theta plus theta. Do you remember sine and cosine theta? What will we do? We wanted to have sine theta, cosine theta, and then plus what? Plus because you keep the same sign, cosine theta, sine theta. With me? So what do you have? 2 sine theta, cosine theta. Similarly, what will be cosine 2 theta? Is what? Cosine of theta plus theta. So cosine is always what? Cosine together is cosine square. Sine square together, multiplied together is sine. Plus become what? Minus, you have sine square. What will be tangent? 2 theta is tangent theta plus theta. What happens here? Is what? Separate tangent theta plus tangent theta. And what? 1 opposite tangent theta times tangent theta is tangent square. So what do we have? 2 tangent theta over 1 minus tangent square theta. With me? So these three formulas come from where? The sum and difference formulas. Okay, so if you wanted it, if you remembered all the sum and difference formulas, the double angle formula, you don't need to remember. Just make the alpha and beta both are theta. Okay, so how could we find this question? And this is on the exam too. So sine theta equal to 4 over 5. Theta is in quadrant 2. Find the exact values. So remember, so when we talk about this, when we know sine theta and theta is in which quadrant, we always draw the angle in the quadrant. So theta in the second quadrant, sine is what? Opposite over hypotenuse, 4 over 5. And do you remember what will be this side? So this is a special right triangle, yeah? 4, 5, and what? 3, yeah? But it's on the negative axis, so it's negative 3. So what do we have here? We know sine theta equal to 4 over 5. What will be cosine theta? Negative 3 over 5. What will be tangent theta? Is 4 over negative 3, yeah? So what do we have here then? Sine of 2 theta equal to 2 sine theta cosine theta, yeah? From the formula. The 2 times 4 over 5 times negative 3 over 5. So what do you have here? Negative 12, negative 24 over 25. So what will be cosine 2 theta? Cosine 2 theta is cosine square minus what? Sine square theta. So what do we have? Negative 3 over 5 square minus 4 over 5 what? Square. Do not forget you have to square both numerator and denominator. You have 9. Negative disappears, yeah? 25 minus 16 over 25 is what? Negative 7 over 25. So what will be tangent to theta? It will be 2 tangent theta over 1 minus tangent square theta. So what do we have here? The 2 times what? Negative 4 over 3, 1 minus 4 over negative 3 square. So what do we have here? Negative 8 over 3, 1 minus 16 over 9, yeah? So what do we have? Negative 8 over 3, combine like term, minus 7 over 9. So what do we have? You have minus 9 over 7. Yeah, so what do we have? 3, 3. So positive, negative is positive, is 24 over 7. What else could you do for the tangent to theta? if you find sine 2 theta at cosine 2 theta, what will be tangent 2 theta? Sine 2 theta over cosine 2 theta. So it's negative 24 over 25 over negative 7 over 25 is what? 24 over 7. Okay, so for the tangent 2 theta, if you know sine and cosine, you do not need to separately calculate the value. Okay, so you can directly use sine over cosine, or you can use the formula. Okay, so this is this one, and so these are the details of in the book. What should you do? Okay, so you know a lot of things they are repeating, so I just wanted to combine them together and show you different method. Okay, so for the cosine 2 theta, and they wanted to introduce, so this formula we have already learned, yeah. So where does this 2 come from? Okay, so we want, in order to get this 2, you have to remember sine square equal, it's not equal. Okay, so it's sine square plus what? Cosine square equal to what? 1. So then what will you have? Sine square will be equal to what? 1 minus cosine square. And cosine square equal to what? 1 minus what? Sine square. Okay, so with these two things, you will get the next two formulas. So cosine 2 theta equal to cosine square minus sine square, yeah? What is cosine square again? It's what? 1 minus sine square. And then you minus sine square. What do you have? Yeah, so 1 minus 2 sine square. So you get this formula. And for this formula, what will you get? Cosine 2 theta equal to what? Cosine square minus sine square. So cosine square, you wanted to get rid of sine square. What do you have? Minus 1 minus cosine square. Distribute, what do you have? 2 cosine square theta minus 1. This is from here, okay? So you are using one of the identities to get the rest of them. Okay, so and these two formulas, why do we want these two formulas? Is in order to what? Get the half angle formula. Okay, so we will introduce later. Okay, so first we wanted to verify some identities. Okay, so sine of 3 theta. What is sine of 3 theta? Is you can separate as 2 theta plus theta, and then you can use what? The sum formula. Is sine 2 theta cosine theta plus cosine sine, because what happens? You always sine cosine and you keep the sine here, yeah? And what is sine 2 theta again? Is 2 sine cosine. This is your what? Sine 2 theta. And so what is cosine 2 theta? Here you wanted to use 1 minus 2 sine square. Why? Why should we use this one, not the other two? Okay, so because when you look at the right side, you only have sine here, yeah? Of course, you wanted to use what? Sine as much as possible. You do not want to use what? Cosine, yeah? So this is why, okay? So this is why you choose this formula. Okay, so then you combine, simplify. It's 2 sine cosine square plus sine theta minus 2 sine cube theta. Okay, 2 minus sine cube theta. Okay, so then what should we do? Again, what do you have? Only have on the right side? Only what? Sine. Then what happens? Do you want the cosine? No. So we want to replace the cosine square. What is the cosine square from the identity? 1 minus what? Sine square. So now everything is what? In sine. Then what will you do? You distribute 2 sine theta, add what? Combine like term. So it's 2 sine theta times 1, 2 sine theta. 2 sine theta times sine square is minus 2 sine cube plus sine theta minus 2 sine cube. So then you combine like term, you will get this. Okay, so this is what you do. So because the right side you only have sine, so on the left side you want to get rid of the cosine as much as possible using the identity formula, using the double angle formula. Okay, this is this one. Okay, so the power reducing formula. Okay, so the power reducing formula. So where does this formula come from? It comes from what? The double angle. Cosine 2 theta equal to what? 1 minus 2 sine square theta. So what happened? How could you solve this? You move the 2 sine square theta on this side equal to what? 1 minus cosine 2 theta, yeah? So what will be sine square theta equal to? 1 minus cosine 2 theta over 2. So similarly, cosine 2 theta equal to what? 2 cosine square theta minus 1. Then you add 1 on both sides. 1 plus cosine 2 theta equal to 2 cosine square theta. And cosine square theta equal to 1 plus cosine 2 theta over 2. Okay, I would strongly recommend you, deduce these formulas by yourself after class. Okay, so it's a very good practice. What will be tangent square? Where this formula come from? Okay, this one is a tricky one. It's sine square over cosine square. Okay, so think about this. It's not sine square over cosine square. It's 1 minus cosine 2 theta over 1 minus 1 plus cosine 2 theta. Okay, so the tangent square is division here. Okay, so now we want to look at the example. Oh, this one is a very useful example. Okay, so typically this is the example that I typically put it on the exam if we have face-to-face class. So sine force x is sine square x square. You guys know this, yeah? So because power to the power you multiply, so 4 equal to 2. So why do we want to use sine square? Because we have the power reduction formula. Sine square can be written as what? 1 minus cosine 2x over 2 square. Okay, so one of the common error here is a lot of students were only distribute the power. So that's wrong. What do? You have to FOIL it. You have to FOIL is 1 minus this means you need to have the middle term. A lot of students will forget the middle term here, okay? And then some students even forget the 4. It's 4 here, it's not 2. Okay, so now after you FOIL and separate, what is the only bad term you have? Cosine square, yeah? So cosine square, how could you get to reduce the power for the cosine square? Use the power reduce formula again for cosine. So here is 2x, here is theta, here will be 2 theta, and here is 2x. What will be here? 4x, yeah, so it's always a double. Yeah, so then you get all these things. Okay, so then the rest of them is what? Algebra. You combine like term and get all these things. Okay, so this one I strongly recommend you do it carefully by yourself after class. Okay, very important formula. You will be able to practice all the power reducing formulas. Okay, so the half angle formula. Where the half angle formula come from? The half angle formula come from the power reducing formula. So do you remember sine square theta? What does it then equal to? 1 minus what? Cosine 2 theta over 2. Cosine square theta equal to what? 1 plus cosine 2 theta over 2. Tangent square theta equal to what? 1 minus cosine 2 theta over what? 1 plus cosine 2 theta. Okay, so here is theta, here is 2 theta, here is theta, here is 2 theta. And if you make what? Theta to be what? Alpha over 2. So what do you have? Sine square of alpha over 2 must be equal to what? 1 minus cosine alpha over 2. Are you with me? Then what will you do? Square root. You have plus or minus. Get it, yeah? Okay, so this is where the half angle formula comes from. It's come directly from your what? Directly from power reducing formula. And because it's what when you have a square equal to this, when you square root, you do not forget what? Plus or minus. Plus or minus. Okay, so the next one is what? Using the find the exact value of cosine 105. Okay, so cosine 105. Okay, so here they didn't specify here, but I also wanted you to do it like this. Cosine 105. Okay, so first thing I wanted you to say is, what is 105? 105 is in quadrant what? Quadrant 2. Yeah, so then cosine 105 is always what? Less than 0. I always wanted you guys to do this step first. Because why? Because when you use half angle formula, you always have what? Plus or minus. So you have to decide whether it's plus means positive or negative. So the positive or negative depends on what? Quadrant. Which quadrant is this angle in? And which trigonometric function value are you looking for? Okay, so this is how we decide here. And then you can use what? Cosine 105 degrees equal to what? Negative. Yeah, so you do not need to plus or minus anymore. It's what? 1 plus. It will be what? Twice. Yeah, so it will be double of this. Cosine what? 210 degrees over 2. You with me? And then you can use the value that you have is 2, 1 plus negative square root of 3 over 2. You with me? And then what could you do? Yeah, so you can simplify your answers, like, okay, common denominator and square root of 4, you can make the 2 out. With me? The rest of them is what? Algebra. The algebra. Okay, so because what you have doing here, 2, yeah, common denominator. So this is why you have what? 2 over 2 minus square root of 3 divided by another 2. This is where the 4 comes from. Clear? Good. So there is another half angle formula directly with what? Cosine alpha, sine alpha. Where does this thing come from? Okay, so in the book they didn't give you specifics, but I wanted to give you where does it come from. This is what? Actually you multiply 1 plus cosine alpha on both top and the bottom, or 1 minus cosine alpha on both top and the bottom. Okay, so then what do you have? 1 minus cosine square sine alpha over 1 plus cosine alpha. And because square, when you square root of a square, you also have plus or minus, so it cancels the outside plus or minus. So you only have what? Sine alpha over 1 plus cosine alpha, or 1 minus cosine alpha over sine alpha. So the deduction of this formula for this part is not required for you to remember, but it's a very good technique that you should know. Okay, you could know to practice. Okay, that will be the end of this section.